Hello, my name is LoG and welcome to another edition of LoG Power-Ups. In today's Power-Up, we will be talking about arpeggiating chords. So we will be holding chord shapes and then picking the strings individually. Let's see what this Power-Up sounds like. This power-up will be split into parts 1, 2, 3, and then the final part where we will run the entire thing along with a track that gradually increases tempo. Let's get started now with part 1. Okay, for this part, we're going to focus almost exclusively on the picking pattern itself. We're not really going to dive too much into the chords just yet. At the end of this video, we'll cover a couple of them, but we're going to do 3 things. So first, we'll talk musically about what the pattern is. Then we'll zoom in on my right hand so we can see exactly what I'm doing to play this pattern. And then we'll go over, like I said, a couple of the chords from the progression. So musically, what is happening? Well, let me first just talk about generally what the pattern is. So the pattern, first of all, never leaves the 4 strings, the middle 4 strings. It never plays the thick E string, never plays the high E string. So those are always out of the picture. We're only playing A, D, G, and B strings. And the pattern is simply this. We play the A string, skip to the G, play the D string, skip to the B. So it's kind of this jumping back and forth thing. So A, G, D, B. Then when we hit the B string, we just walk backwards. So that's the B string, then we walk back. G, D, A, and then we repeat. So A, G, D, B, walk back. G, D, A, repeat. A, G, D, B. So let me play it a couple times by myself without talking, and you can see what it sounds like. Okay, so again, alternating A, G, D, B, walk back, G, D, A, and then repeat. So you'll notice that it sounds like there's 2 A's happening right in a row, and that's because there are. The last note of the phrase is A, the A string, I should say, and the first note of the phrase is the A string. So we start and end on the same string. So watch that. Here's the beginning, end, bam, right there, and we repeat. So we'll hear like a bum bum at the end of it. That's always how it will go. So the other thing about this pattern that's notable is that it's groups of 7. So if I were to play a normal group, like groups of 4 or something like that, if I were to play this in time as normal 16th notes, whenever I start the pattern over, it will always land on the downbeat, right? So if I just did the first 4 notes, every time I start that A string, the beginning of the part, it's always going to land on a downbeat, right? Because it's 4-note group, and normal beats have 4 16th notes in them, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Notice whenever I say a number, I'm hitting the A string because that's the beginning of the phrase. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? But that's not what this is. This is a 7-note group. So what that means is if you're looking for the pattern to start over on a downbeat, on a number, it won't happen for a really long time. It won't happen for 7 beats, in fact. So I'm going to play this and count to 7. You'll notice every time I hit a number, every time I say a number, I'm not going to be starting the pattern over. It's going to be somewhere else in the shape. It will only start over on the downbeat on a number on the beginning note once I go through 7 beats. And then on the next one, the next beat 1, that's where it will start over. So I'm going to count and play this. So watch this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So see that? I would count up to 7, and then on the next one, bam, that's where the pattern starts over. So it gives kind of a a little bit of like a chaotic or random sound, especially when you do it over 4. So if you like this sound, if you're looking for something a little bit more, less repetitive sounding, you can just take a normal kind of picking pattern, whatever you're doing, and turn it into an odd number grouping. So 3s work fairly well, 5s, 7s, you could do like 11 if you want to. All of those they won't line up perfectly with each beat as the beats happen. It will take some time until the pattern starts over eventually on the downbeat. So that is actually not what's happening in this track. This track is straight up in 7, so every time I repeat the pattern, the track is kind of emphasizing it somehow with a kick drum or with chord, keyboard hits or something like that. So what I just described is not really happening in this track, but you can make it happen in your own music if you want to. So now let's take a look at exactly what I am doing to achieve this picking pattern. Of course, you can just, pick it however you want. You can alternate pick the whole thing. The issue with that, if you were alternate picking everything, because it's an odd note or an odd number of notes in the group, every time you start the pattern over, it will be with a different stroke. So the first time you play, it will be with a downstroke, right? But then when you restart, it will be with an upstroke. So that means every other repetition is going to be a totally different picking configuration, which in my opinion can be a little bit annoying. So that's not what I'm doing. I'm actually using pick and fingers as well as a little bit of what's called economy picking. So let's zoom in on my right hand and see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so let's go over what this picking pattern is. Again, you don't have to do what I'm doing. You can play whatever picking configuration makes the most sense to you, but I would at least recommend that you try what I'm doing because I think it is pretty beneficial to be able to do it like this. So again, the part is the A string. I'm just going to play a random chord down here. A string, G string, D string, B string, and then just walk down back to the A string, and then you repeat like that. So the way that I am doing it is something like this. I'm actually doing pick and then finger, pick and then finger. So I'm doing downstrokes whenever I'm using the pick, and I'm alternating from the middle to the ring finger. So pick, middle finger, pick, ring finger for those first 4 notes. I find it a lot easier than alternate picking like that. You might find the alternate picking way easier than the fingers, and that's great. You just have to figure out what makes the most sense for you. So again, then after that ring finger on the B string, I'm going to do a downstroke on the G string, and then 1 upstroke to handle the D and then the A strings. And that sets me up again for the downstroke on the A string to restart the whole pattern. So the whole thing, pick, finger, downstroke, up, follow through, restart, down, finger, downstroke, up, follow through, down. Like that. I've experimented with doing pick, finger, then an upstroke for all 3 of these. For some reason, it's not comfortable. So I like the downstroke here, turn around for the upstroke to handle those 2 strings, and you restart. So that's what I am doing. Do you have to do that? Again, no, but definitely experiment with it because I think there's some value in there. One way that you can do it that's not finger intensive is pretty much the same exact thing except alternate picking the first 4 notes. So that would be down, up, and then when you get here, I would just follow through with 1 upstroke to hit every string. So like this. Like that. I personally don't do that because whenever I do that technique, my thumb touches the strings and then I end up muting everything, and I don't want to mute everything. So if you can do that without muting the strings, by all means do that. I'll show you what I mean. You can hear me muting the strings every time, so it's kind of not my favorite sound. So I personally like to use the fingers because there's less of that muting going on. But if that's something that's easy for you and you can do it and make it sound good, definitely do that. If you are going to be doing this 1 stroke to handle multiple strings, most people call that sweep picking, make sure that you are doing 1 stroke, not multiple strokes. A really common thing when people are practicing this is they'll do this. Let's say I'm going to do upstrokes this entire way. People will start the technique like this. That is not what I'm doing. It is 1 stroke for all 4 strings. Watch this. I start the stroke on the B string. I'm already sitting on the G string ready to go. Now I'm on the D string, sitting on the D string, ready to go. Now I'm on the A string, sitting there, ready to go. So that's one stroke. My hand never lifts. I'm not going pick, lift, pick, lift. It's pick, follow through, into the next, into the next, into the next, into the next. That's how it has to be when you are doing any kind of economy or sweep picking motion. That's the whole point of the technique. The whole idea of the technique is to limit the amount of motion that you're doing, right? So if we're just doing this, picking normal, that defeats the whole purpose. We have to move less. That's why it's called economy picking. It's called economy of motion, right? We're only moving when we absolutely have to. And when we're going like this, we can just use one motion to handle every string. Just like if you were going down like that. I'm not going like this, right? Defeats the purpose because now I'm going down and up every time. And that, again, is not economy of motion. So if you are doing that technique, make sure it's one stroke to handle multiple strings. So again, what I'm doing looks something like this. Let me play a little faster. Something else I would recommend that you do, I'm playing just with a random chord down here, and of course we're going to play this exercise with chords, but I actually would recommend that you start by not playing a chord and play dead notes. So just, touch all the strings, kill all the strings so they're dead, and then pick the pattern. Because what's going to happen there is you'll hear the attack a lot better than if you played with a chord. Because sometimes with a chord, when the chord is ringing out, it will mask when the pick or your fingers are actually hitting the string, and sometimes you'll be slightly off or rushing or dragging and you won't realize it because the notes of the chord are ringing out. So if you do it dead like this, you'll only hear the attack, and then you can really hear your timing, and you can hear that if you're rushing or dragging somewhere in the pattern. So for me personally, I tend to rush at those last two notes, that one upstroke that handles the D, A strings in my pattern. So I'll play that a couple times. I'll try it faster. That's always kind of where it is. So that's usually what I work on when I'm doing this. I just have to really focus on how my hand is moving, make sure it's in time. So that's what I would practice. Whatever picking configuration you're using, make sure you're doing it with dead notes first and then apply the chords to make sure that everything is nice and smooth and always in time. Okay, so now we have an idea of what the right hand is doing with the picking configuration. So let's go over what the basic chords are. So every chord in this entire power-up never actually touches the B string. The B string is open the entire time. So the only thing we really have to worry about are these small little 3-note chords on the A, D, and G strings. It makes it pretty easy. This first chord looks like this. We're playing the 11th fret, that's the G sharp on the A string. Then we're playing its flat 3 and its flat 7. So just it by itself, and the B string, by the way, the open B string is just doubling its flat 3. So we've got 2 flat 3s in that chord. So this chord just by itself is kind of a minor 7 chord without the 5. These are really, really popular. A lot of people play them. They sound really nice. So again, I'm just playing G sharp, B, F sharp. It's 1, flat 3, and then flat 7. Now I'm playing with my ring, pointer, pinky, but you can play that with middle if you want. It's not the most comfortable for me, but middle, pointer, ring finger, or middle, pointer, pinky if you want to. That's a little strange, but whichever one that makes the most sense to you. And of course, with the pattern, sounds like this. Right, so let me play it a little bit faster. There it is. We play this shape 3 times, so we repeat the pattern 3 times with this chord. So 1, 2, 3, and then on the 4th time, what we're going to do is move the ring finger back 1 fret to G natural. Pointer finger doesn't move, still stays on the B, and then my middle finger goes down here to the E right there. So it's down 1 string from the B. Kind of feels like you can look at it 2 ways. You can look at it as a G6, so 1, 3, 6 of G, and then the open B string is just another 3. Personally, I would probably look at it as an E minor with G in the bass, so E minor in the first inversion with the 3 in the bass. So that would be like the 3rd of E, the 5th of E, and then the root of E minor, and then the open B string is just another 5. So the chord looks a little crunched up, but that's what it is. That's the fingering I'm using. You might be able to do something like that, but I think this is the most comfortable because I don't have to move my pointer finger when I'm coming from this chord, right? My pointer finger just stays right there. So again, that's only 1 repetition of that chord. When we are done with when we are done with this repetition, we will go back to the first chord and just do it all over again. Once we start going through the rest of the progression though, of course, we're going to play this chord and then keep going down and playing all the different chords. But for this part, we're just going to play these two. So again, this chord, 3 repetitions. 1 for this, then back to here. So let me play it a couple times by myself. Okay, and play a little slower. Etc. So again, 3 times here, once there, back to here. First chord, G sharp minor. We're playing the 1, flat 3, and the flat 7, super common. Then the next chord, we're just pulling this A string back a fret. Pointer finger on the D string doesn't move. The note on the G string up there moves back 2 frets. And we play this little kind of crunched up shape that I look at as an E minor, like a E minor chord like this, but with 3 in the bass. So G, B, E. Like that, with the open B string, of course. So that's pretty much that. In this part, we're about to run a track that runs from 50 to 100. And like I said, this is all we're doing. We're playing this chord, 3 repetitions of the pattern, this chord, 1 repetition, and then we start the whole thing over. So the goal of this is to really solidify what the right hand is doing. So I'm going to be playing these chords exactly like I just described. But if you'd rather just play dead notes like this, and just kind of solidify what you want to do for the pattern and play that over the track so you don't have to worry about the left hand, by all means do that. That might be a great idea just to figure out what's the most efficient way for you to do this. And then once you're comfortable, add the chords, make sure everything sounds good, make sure all the notes are ringing out, there's no dead notes, etc. And then you can move forward with that particular picking configuration. So again, this track is going to be from 50 to 100. Yes, 50 BPM to 100 BPM, and we're going to move through, I think, about maybe 3.5 minutes worth. So anyway, let's get over to that track. right, that does it for part 1. The main goal of this part is to make sure that you have a picking pattern that you can repeat continuously without making mistakes. If you enjoyed this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below, and I will see you guys in part 2.